Okay, Samuel, let's get into another episode of the Dr. Owen Show. Today, we're going to tell you everything you need to know before you start shoveling creatine in 10 minutes or less. From a doctor whose personal passion project is sitting on the sofa reading research papers on supplements and herbal remedies. You ready?
Yeah, dude. Take me from wherever creatine comes from through to the table and my protein shaker. Yeah, you keep harping on about it. Tell me how it works.
Excellent question that I set you up for. I'll try and give you as good an answer. So creatine is a naturally occurring amino acid compound that's not quite complex enough to be considered a protein. Think of it like pieces of Lego where the cutoff to be labeled as a completed piece of Lego or a protein would be 4 walls and a roof. And instead, all we've got is one wall assembled out of a very small number of amino acids. Our bodies produce some small amounts and we access plenty more of it through food, specifically eating skeletal muscles. Why is this? Because, well, it gets taken up selectively in our bodies and in the bodies of other mammals by the muscles, brain and testes, and most of us aren't ordering brain or testicle burgers. It acts as an acidity buffer and a short-term energy battery in the muscle, brain, and testes by taking up residence where the transformation of chemical energy to kinetic energy occurs, where phosphate ions are being repeatedly ripped from adenosine triphosphate or ATP molecules to make adenosine diphosphate or ADP molecules. Creatine's role here, well, in times of rest, it grabs up for itself a phosphate ion, and then when we get active, it offers it up for energy. When we've transformed that ATP into ADP, it sticks the phosphate on the ADP, returning it to ATP again, and we go again. And it also draws water towards it, which is pretty good for keeping the muscles hydrated. More energy, an extra rep or two, and a little extra attention. Sounds pretty good, right?
Pretty solid, mate. Actually, testicle burgers. I was just thinking about Liver King there. But perhaps for the rest of us, it sounds like it's just a little burst of extra energy. Is that right? When your body's struggling?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Nice. I like that. Cool. Well, okay then. Tell me how it works.
I feel like we've pretty much covered that. But basically, what we want to do is we want to build up our muscle stores of the stuff in between bouts of exercise or strenuous cognition. And we do that by scooping maybe 3 to 5 grams a day every day is usually enough for most of us to build up those stores. So we're not surging it around exercise or around complex tasks like we might do with caffeine and maybe some stimulants if you're that way inclined. So we build up our levels through constant routine, small amounts of supplementation. And then, like I said, basically acts as that energy buffer, acts as a thing that pulls hydration into the muscle cells. And that's how it works, mate.
Well, how effective is it?
Oh, how effective is it? Yes, right, getting there. So the reason why I keep harping on about creatine is I guess I'm a bit of a people pleaser and it's a fun one to talk about because over 40 plus years of scientific research and literally billions of scoops of creatine supplementation, we've got a lot of data to support its effectiveness and its safety. So the first thing to sort of signpost is it doesn't do anything on its own. It needs to be paired with resistance training to give you any noticeable gains. So we did speak about how it does draw water into the muscles, and there's also some research into how that might be an independent muscle protein synthesis trigger, but the extent of that effect size has not been observed as creatine doing anything without being paired with exercise. When we do pair it with exercise, 2024 meta-analysis that will be linked in the show notes found an average 1.1 kilogram increase in muscle mass across all the studies involved when compared to resistance training alone. And these studies averaged 8 weeks in duration with around 3.8 training sessions per week. Don't ask me what 0.8 of a training session is. I guess that's the one where you're doing bench press on your own and you kind of chicken out.
What's that? 1.1 kilos in 8 weeks. Sounds pretty solid.
Yeah. So the studies included in the meta-analysis were a mixture of previously untrained people going into a solid progressive overload regimen and trained athletes continuing with it. But across that span, the average increase for those doing the training plus creatine versus those just training as 1.1 kilograms of muscle mass. And importantly, there was a 2025 study on the back of this measuring strength improvements. And basically, just 3 days of creatine loading was found in this particular 2020 crossover trial to significantly increase reps completed at 60% of 1 rep max, 80% and 1 rep max for both bench press and squat. Yeah, what's kind of cool about those crossover trials is actually they use the same people twice. They just cycle them through both arms of the trial, so that helps sort of control for confounding factors. And yeah, other studies that also show improvements in that 1 rep max strength.
Dude, that's incredible. You pretty much sold me here. That is to say, please tell me there are no side effects. Is it safe?
So keep selling is what I hear you saying. Yeah, super safe when ingested at sane levels of somewhere around 5 grams per day long term. But there have been studies looking at 20 grams per day long term and also found it not to be causing any problems or dramas. And that's why you can buy it off the shelf at a supermarket. But when it comes to safety, the commonest concerns have to do with the following: kidney disease, hair loss, and dangerous dehydration and cramping. And we'll cover the science of each of those in turn. First, the big cheese, kidney disease. Creatine's implicated in this through its association, not causation. Why? Because commonly, to monitor kidney function, we measure blood levels of the buildup of a closely related compound called creatinine. So every day, as the body sort of recycles out with the old, in with the new, 1 to 2% of our body's stores of creatine are converted into creatinine, and all of that is peed out through the kidneys. Lots of other products of metabolism are partially peed out through the kidneys, partly pooped out, partly broken down into something else in the liver. So we measure creatinine as a marker of kidney function for that reason. But one of the ways to push up your creatinine levels in your blood would be to put more creatine in your body. So what we find is that basically, despite 20 grams per day over a long time not damaging the kidney when measured with any other marker of kidney disease, the blood creatinine levels go up. So it doesn't cause kidney disease, but it can impair the ability of your medical professional to measure your kidney function, particularly if they don't know about it and they haven't been able to agree a workaround based on what's available locally in terms of blood labs and urine sampling.
Blimey. Go on then. Tell me the big one.
Oh, the big one
affect my hair loss.
For you and I, hair loss. Yes, true. We'll keep the floppy mops on top. So yeah, I've covered this one in another more focused video that we'll link. Basically, there was this weak study out of South African schoolboy rugby players, just 20 of them involved in the sample, that didn't measure creatine supplementation and hair loss directly, but measured creatine supplementation and dihydrotestosterone or DHT levels in the blood. That's never been replicated anywhere else. That did find for the half of the group that took the creatine supplements that DHT levels in the blood went up. And that's important because DHT is a known driver of male pattern baldness in susceptible individuals. There are some lucky sods who can run really high levels of DHT throughout the whole body and in the scalp and not get any male pattern baldness. And there are others who are very sensitive to it and kind of know that it's quite not genetically baked in, but pretty heavily suggested that hair loss is going to become a big thing quite early in life. So again, no other studies ever reported creatine increasing DHT levels. Then last year, the first and only study directly measuring creatine and hair loss was published, and it didn't find any significant difference. I think they only tracked it for about 3 months, but they did do a thorough set of actually measuring how many hairs there were per unit area on the scalp before, during, and after, and didn't find any hair loss. So that's quite reassuring, but there's not that much data on it. Just one study. And so here's what I think is happening. Hair shedding occurs all the time, and it's a natural part of the hair growth cycle. And people are averaging somewhere between 50 and 150 lost hairs each day as part of that. As each follicle basically pushes the old one out to create the new one, and you keep going and you keep going. And a lot of that is mediated by testosterone and dihydrotestosterone. We, for example, know that pregnant women who give birth and then their testosterone production comes online around 3 months post giving birth, they get a lot of hair shedding after having experienced their thickest, most luscious hair during pregnancy. And that's all basically driven by testosterone and dihydrotestosterone levels. And that can be pretty distressing, obviously, at 3 months if they've not been for it and know that that's what to expect. So yeah, What tends to happen, I think, is people who start supplementing creatine become newly hypervigilant and aware of hair shedding. And they associate this as a sign of significant hair loss, but they don't have a sort of comparing apples with apples comparison to compare to normal rates of shedding because they've never really been paying any attention before. And people who start taking creatine as a gym supplement usually do it as a part of a larger raft of pro-testosterone lifestyle changes like resistance training and losing body fat. So perhaps if they're successful in becoming leaner and stronger and increasing their testosterone levels, they may also increase their dihydrotestosterone levels, which can only be made from testosterone. And if they've got those hair follicles that are susceptible to being shrunk by DHT, they will notice progressive male pattern baldness, perhaps at a slightly accelerated rate, had they not made all of those raft of changes. But it doesn't seem to be the creatine specifically, at least not given the limited data on it so far. But there have been quite a few other studies looking at creatine and testosterone levels that haven't shown a significant increase, but usually quite short term.
Okay, yeah. Honestly, it feels like one of those things, isn't it? It's like you can't point to the cause of that then, or the cause being creatine. I mean, I wonder if that had anything to do with the whatever results they had come out of South Africa or the South African rugby boys. But yeah, okay, that makes me feel a little bit better. Let's blame all the gym rats for being gym rats, not for taking creatine. Is that fair?
Well, I think only a certain subset of gym rats with that susceptibility to hair follicles becoming increasingly diminished with DHT. And yeah, even that, we've just not got that much data on it. Anyway, the last one we said we'd cover is the dehydration thing. This is actually a wild one because the data strongly points in the opposite direction. There were some concerns that taking creatine supplementation puts you at risk of dehydration or muscle cramps and that sort of thing. But actually, it gets selectively taken up by the muscles and it draws water towards it. We know that, like, if you leave the lid off and watch it become clumpy, that's because it's drawing water in from the air. All the way back in 2008, there was a paper published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine that showed that creatine supplementation actually seems beneficial to athletic performance under physical stresses, so dehydration or going really long and far. Which is to say, yeah, in the 3 to 5 gram per day range, creatine's consistently reported as a safe thing for healthy people to do, and caveats are really only thrown in to protect against lawsuits in extremely fringe cases. So I'll throw one in. Don't take creatine if you have a known rare condition that would make this harmful, or if it's going to interfere with important monitoring of your kidney disease without a satisfactory workaround being found. Yeah.
Dude, I'm also shocked by the water thing. Like, I don't know if it was always in my head, but whenever I have a drink with creatine, I'm always like, okay, I need to drink loads and loads of water. And I almost feel like my mouth is parched. Is that just like me being inside my own head because I've heard of the dehydration? Or is there actually some science behind that? Because it kind of speaks to that with the whole absorbing of moisture.
Yeah, I guess particularly when people are doing the loading phase, you get a stronger drawing water towards it effect. And yeah, it draws water towards it essentially. So if you do dump a lot of it into the gastrointestinal tract, then you will draw quite a lot of water towards that, which means you're pulling water from somewhere else essentially. So feeling a little bit dehydrated on creatine and then pushing water, it's a pretty easy workaround, isn't it? If you increase the total amount of water in the body commensurately by chugging it with a pint of water, then you've probably offset the entire effect of it. And yeah, it's pulling water into the places that it goes. If the overall net water content of the body is not changing, then it has to come from somewhere, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Nice. Cool. Well, you've done a good job of quashing all my various fears, most importantly, the hair loss one. So, based on the mountain of evidence, what's the best way of taking it?
Yeah. Okay. So as mentioned, we've got to build up those levels gradually over days to weeks. So repetitive sort of daily is important, but sort of timing around training is not particularly important. There was one study that showed that actually if you do take it around training, you tend to absorb it slightly better. There's another one that found that co-ingestion with carbohydrates absorbs it slightly better. Some people believe in doing a 3 to 4 scoops for a short period of time, maybe a week or so, loading phase, but actually the data suggests that 3 to 4 weeks of one scoop gets you up to muscle saturation. It's probably worth pointing out that there are loads of different creatine formulations on the market. The bioavailability, or the amount that gets into the bloodstream from the cheapest, most commonplace and best researched one, creatine monohydrates, something like 88% of what you put in is going into the bloodstream, and then from there hopefully getting taken up into the brain and muscles. So that's pretty good. It's a lot cheaper than the alternatives, and more rigorously researched. So I think it's still number one, and anyone trying to encourage you that any other form of creatine is better is probably trying to sell you another form of creatine.
Can you just repeat that name? Sorry.
Creatine monohydrate.
Got ya. Nice.
Yeah, which just means it's bound to a single water molecule. By the by, then the other thing to mention is those of us that have high creatine content in our diet and therefore are already close to muscle saturation might benefit a bit less than those of us that maybe follow a vegetarian or vegan diet and don't have a lot of creatine in the diet. So some people, around 15%, are non-responders in terms of they don't manage to move the needle very much on their muscle creatine stores, and they don't get much bang for their buck in terms of additional extra reps in the gym, and therefore hypertrophic gains. Other people get a lot of bang for the buck, and they tend to be people who don't have a lot of creatine in their diet.
Nice. Cool. So to me, it sounds like there's a whole load of different variables. Is it fair for me to characterize this as a one for ChatGPT with enough context, i.e., what's your diet like? What's your exercise like? What are your objectives? Or is it more straightforward than that?
I think it is way more straightforward than that. I think you don't need to be dialed in at all. You just need to figure out, just as you want to figure out when you can brush your teeth or floss them in the day and make it a daily routine, you need to figure out when you can have one scoop of creatine in your daily routine.
Boom. Well done. Nice. I like that then. I better go and have mine.
Awesome. Let's wrap it up there. 40 years, billions of scoops, thousands of studies. And the honest summary, creatine works. It's safe and it can help improve muscle mass, strength, cognition, and athletic performance.
Nice one. Thanks, Dr. Owen.
Cheers.